All right, St. Louis, I'm going to take you to school for a second. Now we're going to travel. We're going to travel a little deep, St. Louis, deeper than we would normally travel. It's important for you to think outside the box, if possible. Now, it's going to be very difficult for many of you to think outside the box because you don't have the mind power to think outside the box. You can only perceive at the strength of the power of your mind. If your mind, unfortunately, has not developed enough to leave the box, you might not grasp what I'm trying to convey. However, it's imperative that you continue to try to seek to understand what I'm saying. Now, let's go to school for a moment. We're going to think about races of people, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, etc. And I want you to think about how did the races become different. In other words, if you had in the beginning a living organism mating with another living organism, why would we have so many different races if we all were the same in the beginning? Think about it for a second. In other words, if the world started 13.8 billion years ago, subsequently had to start with two living organisms, unless there was multiple living organisms. But let's think for a second. What happens if there was two living organisms? You can say Adam and Eve or whatever you want to call it. That's fine. We'll use Adam and Eve. We'll use Adam and Eve. But Adam and Eve is a living organism. Now, if Adam and Eve are going the wrong way, their cells are going to make bad copies of themselves. So what's going to happen, they're going to continue to have children. Their children are going to have children and continue. And so on down the line, thousands of years of having children. But if the cells are mutating and making bad copies of themselves, that in a sense tells me you're going to have different races of people, but we all are one at the beginning. Subsequently, due to the fact with the laws of thermodynamics that states entropy shall increase, disorder, and chaos. So if you think about that, if we're going the wrong way clockwise, and the two living organisms subsequently decided to mate and have children, and they were of the same race initially, or shall I say, they were in darkness because their cells hadn't completely reached a level of perfection. So as a result of not reaching a level of perfection, they couldn't have children that were perfected. So as a result, the cells are going to subsequently cause so many disorders. And subsequently, is it possible that we can now come up with a group of people that start mating with themselves, and subsequently they start looking the same, dark skin, light skin, etc. Some of them had eyes that were a little different. Is it possible that based upon our cell mutation, possibly traveling the wrong way, that we are literally decaying, and that's one of the reasons we're perishing, we're dying after 80 to 90 years, and back then it was 40 years or 30 years. So is it okay to say that they had not the power to reverse the laws of thermodynamics and stop time and subsequently create a perfected mind and not a literal person? If we had a perfected mind, there wouldn't be any disorder. Just think for a second, if you take a puzzle that's whole, somebody fixed it, it's completed. It's a 500-piece puzzle and it's completed. You can see the actual picture of what the 500-piece puzzle is displaying, and subsequently throw it on the ground as hard as you can. It's going to start scattering. So what happened is when the puzzle was in the darkness, it scattered. It never contracted inward to show the complete picture. So it's been scattering since we've known ourselves. And as a result, our minds are undeveloped. In other words, you have low level of cognition. We're somewhat mentally challenged. We're retarded. Not retarded in the sense of retarded, but we're mentally challenged. However, the technology that we're creating, such as gasoline, electricity, solar, etc., nuclear power, we look at that as being very creative. But how could it be creative and we're going the wrong way? We can only create things of the level of our mind. So if our mind is not perfected, you can't create perfected things. So the things that we're creating are continuously keeping us in the prison in which we've been currently dwelling since the beginning of creation. They're talking about global warming. Subsequently, we're dying based upon the pollution, but we're still utilizing gasoline, electric. We're still creating the things that's causing us to go deeper into carcinogens and cancer and strokes and diabetes, etc. So what we have to begin to understand is we have to reach the end, the truth. If we can reach a developed mind that could take us to the end of this dark world, we could subsequently begin to see, and precognition could set in, and we could see things as they truly are, because now we have the ability to extrapolate and encode deeper, and as a result, we can now measure the position and the velocity, and we could now enter into a different reality, a different realm. In other words, we're dwelling in the spirit, as most religions will call it. In other words, you're in a perfect light, perfect sound, to where there's no glass or noise that's causing a distorted view. As long as we stay in this system in which we came in from the beginning of creation, we're going to continue to have disorder. Think about it for a second. If we have different races based upon our illiteracy and low cognition, we're going to have different religions, because we're all hallucinating. We're coming up with false doctrine and deities that's not the truth. So as a result, we've accepted that we were going to die one day, and we're doing everything we could do in order to enjoy this life, but we failed to realize that we have not yet lived. If you're dying every day and your cells are making bad copies of themselves, from the beginning of creation, they were making bad copies of. They didn't just start. In our generation, it's been going on since the beginning of creation. You've been basically underneath the magnetic field, gravitational pull, and your neurons and synapses are not firing properly, which will enable you to see. And that's one of the reasons we have evil, wickedness, because the mind is distorted. And as a result of the distorted view, you're going to look at the world through that distorted view, and as a result, that's going to be your reality. But your teachers are blind, your leaders are blind, your politicians are blind, countries were formed because they became tribal. But within those countries, they're still killing each other. So that, within a sense, tells me that we unfortunately have not known the truth. And until we come to the realization that we are created in the image of God, but God is not a person. God is a perfect sound. We must manifest that perfect sound and stop chasing deities and putting people on pedestals. And as a result of placing them on pedestals, we fail to realize that we have the ability to reach a higher level of awareness. And once we reach that level of awareness, we will begin to look at the world differently. And as a result, we can reverse the laws of thermodynamics. And we could start seeing things as they truly are. And as a result, our grandkids and great-grandkids will not continue to experience what we are experiencing. Think about it, St. Louis. Look at what's going on in St. Louis and Chicago, New York, LA. Everyone's talking about Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. All lives matter. And the reason we're so divided is because we're so illiterate. Not just black people. The human mind is illiterate. From the most educated person to the one that's considered to be uneducated is illiterate, because you're living in a prison. And you have not the ability to know that you're living in a prison because you were born in a prison. Subsequently, that became your home, and you never knew that you were capable of doing something greater than what you thought you were capable of doing. So in other words, you go out and get your fancy cars and your big houses, and you can live on things versus your level of intellect. Those things will wither away. You can gain the whole world and lose your damn mind. It's important for us to go beyond 80, 90, 100 years, because as I said before, years to me is power. We must reach a higher level of power. Just like a AA battery cannot process as fast as a nuclear power plant. Just like an analog computer can't process as fast as a computer that has an upgrade at 5G, more power. The human mind, unfortunately, is undeveloped. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, seek ye first the kingdom. We're following these pastors and preachers and apostles. Where are they taking you? I mean, they're suffering from cancer, diabetes, hypertension, strokes, etc. If they're suffering from the same things, that tells me they haven't reached the perfected sound to be able to lead you. The blind are leading you. But yet you don't have enough cognitive ability to know that they are, so you continuously follow them and saying, oh, please help me. No, you must wake up from that dream. Because if you don't, nothing is going to change. You're going to continue to bury your family members, and subsequently they're going to bury you, and it's going to be a continuous, perpetual cycle. I'll be damned if we don't work diligently to figure out what's going on. At some point, we have to say all or nothing, because if we don't, you may be enjoying the world as you think you're enjoying the world, but subsequently, when you place in that nursing home and you can't remember your name, you thinking that's normal. That's not normal. How can it be normal? Your cells are mutating and making bad copies of themselves. No different than from the beginning. As I said, one living organism having hanky-panky, living in darkness, subsequently have another generation. Before you know it, we got different colors of people. But we come up with our own analogy to say, well, he lived on South or another part of the continent, so he was this color, he was that color, his hair is this. What happens if the DNA is causing your hair and your eyes and your texture to be a certain color? Because you're living in poison. What happens if you reach a higher level of awareness? It has nothing to do with your external, it has something to do with the internal, because you would produce so much power. You would literally be able to encode at the molecular subatomic level and be able to magnify what you're seeing thousands of times, and you'll see it in the now and not in the past. So I wanted to come on for a moment. I'm trying my best to get you to all understand that we've not understood. You got wars out here, you got different countries, you got cyber wars, you had World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korean wars, you got countries, you got what happened in Haiti, they executed the president out there. This is crazy. We shouldn't be going through this, and the only reason we're going through this is because we are illiterate. We're literate, but yet you have the mindset to think that these Ivy League schools have the 411 from Harvard, Yale, Oxford. Everyone wants to be like Mike. You hadn't finished the course. You can be like Mike, but you're going to still live in that box with Mike. You can go to Harvard and Yale and Princeton, get a Nobel laureate, become a multi-billionaire, but in 70, 80 years, that same disease that took the guy that was living next to the trash can is going to take you. You say, well, I had a good life. I didn't live by the trash cans. What happens if you can increase your level of life? Isn't that more important than your little 80 years or 90 years of life, which is limited power? Well, you can't perceive beyond what I just said. It's sad. It's really unfortunate. You know, many of you think because you grew up in the inner city of St. Louis and the projects and various other locations that you are incapable of starting to understand what the hell is going on. Just because you didn't grow up in the Prince of Bel-Air doesn't mean that you're not capable of coming up with the level of understanding truth, being able to see things differently. And when you do, you got to pull the trigger. You can't sit back and wait for somebody to pat you on the back. Pull the trigger, all or nothing. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Ain't no shame in my game. I refuse to sit back and do nothing while my grandbabies and your grandbabies, your great-grandbabies continue to follow the same trajectory that we've been following since we've known ourselves. Murderers and rapists and serial killers out here. You got cancer, all kinds of infirmities. Everybody's afraid. Devil is a liar. When you reach a higher level of mind, you're not afraid of anything because you stop time at that micro level. So I want you all to have a wonderful weekend and understand. You can sit back, act a damn fool, continue to back that thing up, have your parties, party over here, and fail to realize that the most important thing you should be trying to do is figure out how the mind works. And once you figure out how the mind works, you'll know how the universe was formed. Until then, you're going to continue to be on that wide gate that leads to destruction and that narrow gate that leads to life. Not many find. But I'll be damned. We're going to find it. And we're finding it. Until next time, may God bless you all. Continue to give you strength and understand. It must be all or nothing. We must take it back by force. And that's the development of our mind. God bless.